Serious. People who have lived on a supposedly haunted house, what was your scariest supernatural encounter? What was it like? Lived in one for 12 years. When we bought the house, we were told that the little girl had died from being burned to death after a mishap with the wood-burning stove in the basement. At the time I didn't believe in ghosts. This happened in the 70s, and we moved in the house in 1998 while expecting our first child. At first it was mostly footsteps we would hear coming up the basement steps. My oldest son heard them once and thought his dad had come home, but it was too early for him. He was only 2 at the time and was pretty upset at me for chain locking the door and not opening it for his dad. His dad parked in the bottom drive and walked up the basement stairs every night after 11 p.m. It was not him we heard, it wasn't time for him. Then we started having toys turn on by themselves, and TVs, and the radio in the basement. Then the footsteps started walking up and down the hallway at night. My husband and I would sit and look at each other, knowing that they were not from any living human. One night my husband and I were sitting in bed, not yet asleep, when I heard a loud crash in the hall. My husband then turned the lamp on, and I asked if he heard that sound. And he said no, but I sure saw something. He then described seeing a small figure dressed in white walking from the hall to his side of the bed. Thinking it was our son, he reached out for it, but nothing was there. That's when he turned the light on. It was sometime later when I saw it. I was laying beside my second-born son, who was 1 at the time. My oldest son was sleeping in a toddler bed in the corner of the room. I was wide awake when I heard crying. I sat up and saw the figure of a small child standing between my bed and the door. A small bit of light was coming in from the hall, the figure was dark, and I could see that it was looking at me. I didn't think anything of it because I thought it was oldest son. I tried to comfort him and told him to get back into bed. It looked at me, then turned and walked out into the hall. I was about to follow it, still thinking it was my son when I heard a soft snoring sound coming from the corner of the room. My son was sound asleep in his bed, he was never up. So a few years passed, and we get a call from the family of the girl who died there. They had seen my sister-in-law who told them about our experiences living in the house. The girl's sister had seen her after her death and said she walked with her to the school bus stop. The dad was visited by his daughter while lying in bed one night in what later became our bedroom. They mentioned that a few of the neighbors had also seen the girl's spirit hanging around the neighborhood. Some time after that, my husband ran into the guy who sold us the house. It's a small town, and everyone knows everyone. My husband told him of his experience seeing the white figure come into our room, and that guy said that he saw the same thing when he lived there. More stuff happened there, but I'll leave it here. When I was in 5th grade, my parents divorced. My dad kept the house I grew up in, and my mom moved into a divided house apartment set up with her soon-to-be new husband. On Halloween night, my mom took me and my siblings trick-or-treating in the small town that the apartment occupied. At the end of the night, my mom took us back to the new apartment to spend the night. The furniture wasn't due to be moved in for a few more days, so we slept in sleeping bags in the living room. I was already on edge because it was a new place still, and the living room had a huge window that faced the sidewalk, so anyone could walk up the porch and look right in. At some point during the night, I had to go to the bathroom. I got up, crossed the room and went to the downstairs bathroom. Before I could go, I swear I heard a voice say, "Hello." I jumped because it sounded like it was coming from the same room as me, right behind my head. It was a high-pitched voice, almost like a little girl, but not quite. Like an adult trying to fake a child's voice, if that makes sense. It sounded happy, like if you were greeting someone you hadn't seen in a while. It didn't sound like either of my sisters or my mom. I just waited in the bathroom for a bit, then eventually calmed down and went back to sleep. A couple of weird things happened while we lived there. Sometimes toys would go missing, there would be weird noises, and my future stepdad even fell down the stairs once after tripping over a hamper that no one can remember putting there, but nothing that logic or reason can't explain. At the end of 6th grade, we moved out of the apartment and into a house outside of town. The last time I was ever there, I was leaving to catch the school bus, but stopped in the bathroom beforehand. As I finished washing my hands, the same exact voice popped up and said, "Goodbye," this time, kind of sad sounding. I might have posted this before, but I wanted to post it again. First, this house was not 150 years old with stories of deaths in the house. It was a new development house in an old neighborhood. The builder had torn down a house from before ours was there. As soon as we moved in, something felt wrong. Our dog would go to certain areas of the house and just growl at empty air. She refused to walk into a certain hallway unless one of us was with her. She would bark down the hallway with menace in her bark, which she never did. That hallway was where the first spooky thing happened. It was Super Bowl Sunday and we were watching the game. My dad was looking down the hallway, the one the dog hated, for a second when he suddenly said, "Hey, Ivan. Come watch the game with us." It was odd since I was behind him and he couldn't see me. I said I was behind him and he jumped up in shock. I could have sworn I saw someone walking down the hallway just now. He said he saw a tall shadow walking down the hall towards the door. That was start of the haunting, like the floodgates had been opened. Lights would flicker on and off on command. As a joke, I once said to a light that was flickering, "If anyone is there, turn the light to full." And it did. The light nearly exploded from how bright it was. A few weeks later, I was sitting alone in my room. My family was out of the country and I was alone with my dog. As I sat there, I heard white noise in my ears, and then I heard a voice. I swear to God it was a voice. It said to me, "You are mine," in the scariest voice ever. The dog starts spazzing out, and I could hear footsteps leaving my room in the hallway, same one. A few days later, I had my door closed, and I swear I could hear a sickly cough from behind my door. All of those were scary, but the worst one had to be when I saw the shadow man. I was driving home from work one night when I felt panic in the back of my head. I had the urge to flee and to look away, but I disregarded the voice and looked up. That's when I saw it. The thing looked like it was made out of an absence of light. It was a shadow because the thing had mass, and I could make out a full body. It was standing in the middle of our driveway looking right at me. I was about 200 yards from the thing. I then heard the same static white noise, and the voice said, "Come see." It turned away from me and walked into the house through a closed door. There are more stories, but those were the most definitive. I've told this story a few times on the net, but I'll repeat it. We, family of 9 kids, 2 parents and pets, lived in a large bungalow here in Christchurch, New Zealand. Several freaky things happened to myself and to some of my sisters. The freakiest one for me was a repeat visitor of what has become to be called the Hat Man. Interestingly, when I first got on the net in the late 90s, I looked up shadow person because I didn't know what else to call it, and the entity that used to appear in my room was the Hat Man exactly. One particular night, when I was 7, the thing appeared outside my bedroom window. My sister, younger by a year, had her bed parallel to mine, with the doorway out of the room between us. So, I see this thing and without being able to make sense of it, it was now in my room and coming over to my bed. I lay down on my tummy and turned my head to look at my sister, who said, "Don't let him get you." I turned my head and could see him coming to lean over me with something in his hand. The thing is, it was entirely black and huge. It was like you could see nothing but dark black. I turned my head to face the wall as I noticed his hand coming down towards me. No fleeb, I felt something poke my shoulder 3 times. I have no recollection of how this particular night's horror ended. Just remember waking up the next morning. There's heaps more freaky stories about this particular house, but I'll wind it up by saying that we moved out of Christchurch when I was 10 years old. At the age of 21, I moved back to Christchurch. I had moved into a house in the inner city and shared it with a girl that just happened to have grown up in the same suburb as me. We got talking about the house and she said, "Did you say you lived in E Road?" And I said, "Yes, that's right." She asked me, "It wasn't number 56, was it?" And I said, "Yeah, how on earth did you know that?" To which she responded, "Everyone knew that house was haunted." When I was 11-12 years old, I remember going downstairs to grab something from the fridge in the afternoon. I had to walk across the living room, into the dining room, into the kitchen. As soon as I reached the bottom of the stairs, I looked over into the arch that separated my living room from the dining and saw a tall black shadow that disappeared as soon as I blinked. I completely froze in fear and it felt like something grabbed my heart. I didn't move for an entire minute even though I tried. As soon as I regained movement, I ran straight up the stairs and I told my older sister, 22 at the time, what I saw. She believed what I said because she never saw me so terrified before. She went to go check the living room, but she didn't find anything. 7 years later, I was telling my younger brother stories, and I told him about what I saw. My stomach sank when he said he saw the same thing in the dining room 2 years ago. He described the same feeling and the same height of the shadow, except he also saw a woman's face. I wondered if he was just messing around with me, but I also never told him about the height and the intense feeling of fear that I felt. We both had the same exact reaction.